I'm not someone who is frequently lost for words, and if I am, it usually comes in response to a horrible story, not at the beginning of an incredible one. But today's guest had me trying as best I could for over an hour to simply write an introduction that does her justice. I settled on the reality that Cindy Gallop is somewhere between a myth and a legend. And yet, despite hers being a story that grows each time a part of it is told, it's one of those rare stories that needs no embellishing. Cindy is, quite simply, a force in this world. Describing herself as the Michael Bay of business because she likes to blow shit up, Cindy is the founder of Make Love, Not Porn, an online platform for the sharing of real-life sex, not the hardcore strangulation and gangbangs that fill the servers of Pornhub. Long before Andrew Tate had found fame for his backward views and lost his entire head of hair, Cindy was on stage delivering a TED Talk which has had over 2.5 million views in the 15 years since. On LinkedIn, where most well-followed people are men teaching other men how to be well-followed, Cindy has 120,000 followers, which she's attracted largely because of how hard she fights every day for the voices of women to be heard in a world where men decide so much. Educated at Oxford University, Cindy has been featured in Marie Claire, Forbes, and Huffington Post, and has worked with some of the world's leading brands during a 35-year-long career that took her to the pinnacle of the global advertising industry and resulted in her winning Advertising Woman of the Year in 2003. Cindy is a titan, a half-English, half-Chinese, 64-year-old woman who doesn't do the status quo. When I spoke with her friend of 15 years, Bea Arthur, she told me that Cindy has always been a big thinker, despite her tiny, impossibly fashionable body. She shared stories about how almost every conversation with Cindy leaves people inspired about themselves, their ideas, and their ability to drive change. Bea told me, I used to love those chats in the infamous black apartment. They would get all your neurons firing and get you so excited about your ideas. But far from the black apartment and her home today in New York City, a place that thrives on people with loud voices, Cindy grew up in a place where women were barely allowed a voice at all, which is where I want to start. Cindy, can you tell me what it was like growing up in Brunei?
I always have to explain that growing up in Brunei was a lot more boring than it sounds. Brunei is a very small independent state on the coast of Borneo. It's 200 miles long. When I was there, it had a population of 200,000 people and one main road that ran the length of the state. And if you're a kid or a teenager, there was very little to do. My parents would regularly apologize to me and my sisters for our childhood because they knew that we'd grown up in a place where the usual lure of, pop music and movies, all of that was not happening in the way that we would have liked it to.
What kind of access did you have to, I guess, the outside world?
My parents did not approve of television. They wanted us to read, so we had no TV. So I lack a lot of childhood cultural touch points that the kids grew up with. But my father was a back to the UK for 3 months when my sisters and I would be put in school for those 3 months so that we didn't miss out on too much schooling. That was certainly where we hoovered up a ton of British culture and absolutely loved it. But those were at 3-year intervals. And the rest of the time, it was listening to the radio and talking about whatever the music and films making their way around Asia were with our Asian classmates.
So you went to boarding school in the UK. How did you get into the advertising industry?
I read English literature at Somerville College, Oxford, and I fell madly in love with theatre at Oxford, which has a very thriving student drama scene. I did everything. I wrote, acted, directed, stage managed. I was the president of my college drama society. And I decided that all I wanted to do was work in theatre for the rest of my life, as you do when you're 20. But I knew I wasn't good enough to be an actress or director. But I used to draw a lot when I was younger. And friends kind of pulled me into designing theatre posters for their shows. From there, I got pulled into promoting and selling their shows, and I really enjoyed doing that. So I became a marketing and publicity officer in theatre in the UK. I worked at theatres like the Yvonne Arnaud Theatre in Guildford, which is a big pre-West End theatre. And then I spent 2 years at the Everyman Theatre in Liverpool. After a few years of doing this, I got completely fed up with working 24/7 and earning chicken feed, which is what the theatre is, basically. And part of my job at the Everyman was giving talks about it to various local groups to promote it. I gave a talk to a group of women in Liverpool, and afterwards, one of them came up to me and she said, "Young lady, you could sell a fridge to an Eskimo." And I thought, that is the universe telling me something. Time to sell out, go into advertising. And so I did.
Now, you had a successful run in the UK, but in 1998, you moved to New York alone. How did that come to be? And can you tell us how you found your place in arguably the world's most famous city?
In 1989, I fetched up at an agency called Bartle Bogle Hegarty, BBH. And I remember on my first day thinking, this is a pretty special agency, and I think I'm going to want to stay here for a while. Little did I realize it would end up being 16 years. So I began working for BBH in London, where I ran big global accounts like Coca-Cola, Ray-Ban, Polaroid. I moved to Singapore in 1996 to help start and run BBH Asia Pacific. And I moved here to New York in 1998 because I got my dream job. I put my hand up and said, my dream job is basically starting up BBH US in New York. And I got it. And so BBH New York began as me in a room with a phone, starting up an ad agency in the world's toughest advertising marketplace, which was a lively old ride. But, very soon after I moved to New York, I realized that I had found my spiritual home. I went, I'm not coming back to London. And so that's why I'm still here.
Now, Make Love, Not Porn. What's it all about and how did it come to be?
So Make Love, Not Porn was a complete and total accident because I never consciously set out to do anything that I very bizarrely find myself doing now. It came about because I date younger men. And I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering an issue that would never have crossed my mind if I had not encountered it extremely intimately and personally. I realized that I was experiencing what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. It's when those two factors converge that porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, well, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 16 years ago, nobody was talking about it. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as the naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So 15 years ago, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com that in its original iteration was kind of a public service announcement. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched at TED in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words "come on my face" on the TED stage 6 times as time. The talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out, telling me things about their sex lives and their porn watching habits they'd never told anyone before. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so that was the point at which I went, oh my God, I now have a personal responsibility. I have to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that will make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And so I turned it into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously, which is what I believe the future of all business should be. And so today, Make Love Not Porn is the world's first and only user-generated, importantly, 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So we're kind of what Facebook would be if it allowed you to openly, healthily, sexually self-express, which it clearly does not. The way to think about us is porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie. Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we all have in the real world. And what we're doing is we are socializing, normalizing, and destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration. So that's what we're doing.
As you've spoken about the great feedback or the great response from the public after that TED talk, the porn industry's a pretty powerful one. Was there any pushback?
No, not at all. In fact, I remember the fall of 2012, which is when we launched Make Love Not Porn in closed alpha. And so nobody had even seen it. We were inviting people in to test it. XBiz, which is one of the biggest trade publications in the adult industry, ran a headline which was along the lines of Cindy Gallop, disrupts the future of the adult industry. And I mean, first of all, I thought, if you tell my parents that one day I would be a headline in the porn industry's biggest trade publication, they would have shrieked. But secondly, I went, they got it before anybody else did. And the important thing to emphasize is, for 15 years, I've been saying the issue isn't porn, the issue is that we don't talk about sex in the real world. That's what we're tackling. I use the Porn as Hollywood movie, Make Love Not Porn as documentary analogy very deliberately, because Make Love Not Porn is the only real world sex counterpoint and complement to porn. We are not a competitor. People like watching movies. People also like watching documentaries. Sometimes in the mood for a movie, sometimes in the mood for a documentary. And I didn't want to Make Love Not Porn to coexist alongside porn, but to be what the world has been lacking until we launched, Make Love Not Porn. This opportunity to see the answer to the question that everyone has asked since the dawn of time, which is, what is everybody else really doing in bed?
For those of our listeners who haven't heard your TED Talk, in it, you delivered a line that has turned out to be an accurate representation of more than just the porn industry. You said,
because the porn industry is driven by men, funded by men, managed by men, directed by men and targeted at men, porn tends to present one worldview. Porn says, this is the way it is.
How much of that statement relates to your experience now with the venture capital industry when it comes to seeking funding for Make Love Not Porn?
First of all, Kane, I'd like to talk about how that observation relates to everything. And what I mean by that is I'm regularly approached by journalists writing articles about porn. And they will ask me things like, so Cindy, do you feel that porn objectifies women? And I will say, I believe that any industry that is dominated by men inevitably produces output that is objectionable, offensive, and objectified women. My industry, advertising, is as male-dominated as every other industry in popular culture, not just porn. Movies, music, publishing, everything around us in popular culture is generated by, funded by, and decided by the male lens. And that's a huge problem. The day we have a porn industry that is managed, led, driven, and informed by women as much as men, that therefore targets 50% of its output at women, as opposed to believing mistakenly that men are the only audience, and that very importantly makes 50% of its money out of women as much as men, is the day we have porn and a porn industry that looks more innovative, more disruptive, more creative, way more lucrative, and the same is true of every other industry. Now, to pick up on your question about the venture capital world. The issue in terms of my battle to raise funding is that I can't even get across a VC's doorstep. They will not touch me with a barge pole, basically. My biggest obstacle there is the one I call fear of what other people will think. I've found out over the years, it is never about what the person I'm talking to thinks. Because when you understand what we do at Make Love Not Porn and why we're doing it, nobody can argue with it. It is always their fear of what other people think, which operates around sex, unlike any other area. I remember a young VC many years ago saw me speak at a tech conference, reached out to me, we had a great conversation. He said to me, I totally get it. My partners won't. Another VC friend of mine, very well-known female VC, said, I think you're onto something really big here, Cindy. But if I took it to partners, they'd go, what do you want? You know, in the VC world, there are too many stakeholders, too many partners, too many LPs. Also, there are what they call vice clauses, commitments to LPs that they will not invest in a set of sectors, which includes adult, also, by the way, usually includes tobacco, alcohol, gums, etc. So I realized very early on that Make Love Porn is not a venture-friendly business. And so that is not where I focus my fundraising efforts.
I read on LinkedIn a couple of days ago that a VC said women founders talk too much about impact in their pitches, and that's why they don't get as much funding compared to their male counterparts who focus more on financial returns. In Australia, in the month of May, 96.6% of funding went to male founders. Is that because women are focused on impact, or are there other things driving these inadequate figures?
Can I just say that quote is absolute fucking bollocks? There are sadly many data-driven studies out there that demonstrate that the reason women don't get funded, only 1.7% of all venture capital last year went to female founders, is due to plain old-fashioned sexism and misogyny. There is a Harvard Business Review article on the fact that the exact same pitch given by women versus by men got a negative response from VCs. The exact same pitch. Okay. Another, again, data-driven research study demonstrated that in pitches, VCs ask men, male founders, positive questions. They ask women negative questions. In other words, they ask men all about the opportunities for the future for their startup, and they ask women all about the potential obstacles and barriers and the negative things that might happen for their startups. I can promise you that whatever crap any male investor wants to make up about why women don't get funded is not the case. I moderated a panel at South by Southwest Sydney last fall called Where Are All the Men? On this exact topic, why are Australian male investors not stepping up and funding women? You know, why are they not championing women? Why are they not recommending women? You know, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm a big believer in micro actions. Micro actions are small, simple, easy to do actions that are so easy to do. Why won't you do them? And I believe in micro actions because I believe change happens from the bottom up, not the top down. Every one of us, every day, undertaking micro actions to change what we want to see change, cumulatively, all of those micro actions add up at scale to enormous impact. So I said to the audience, and by the way, I was very gratified that we did have a lot of men in the audience, you know, and I thanked them for coming. I said to the male VCs and investors in the audience, here's a micro action that I want you to do. The next time you are reading a pitch deck that's been sent to you by a female founder, or you are taking a pitch meeting with a female founder, before you open that deck, before you go into that meeting, pause and say to yourself, this founder that I'm about to meet or hear from is absolutely bloody brilliant, and her startup is the next gigantic unicorn. And then read that deck, take that pitch meeting with that mindset, and I guarantee you'll arrive at a different outcome.
The data supports that women-led startups have greater outcomes than male-led startups. Does it frustrate you that venture capital and the investment landscape isn't data-driven? And why isn't it data-driven?
Fuck data. Data does fuck all. We have literally for decades had the data you reference that says female founders exit faster, female founders burn less cash, female founders get to profitability quicker, female founders build better business cultures. But none of that data makes any difference. John Hegarty, my ex-boss at BBH, who's an absolute genius and a living legend in the advertising world, he would always say information goes in through the heart, not the head. It's not about rationality. It's about emotion. And that is why equally at BBH, our creative philosophy was we don't sell, we make people want to buy. I don't sell with rational arguments. I make people want to buy. Driven to adopt because I have no choice. But I recommend it to all female founders because I think every female or diverse founder could benefit from adopting this. So here's the deal. I know that my Make Love Not Porn investors are out there, and there are a ton of them. And there are a ton of them in every single country in the world, Australia included. They are impossible to find by the usual means because they all have one thing in common. Your willingness to fund Make Love Not Porn is entirely a function of your personal sexual journey. It's a function of your personal lens on sex and sexuality that's been shaped by your own experience of it. And I obviously have no way to research and target for that. Not least because sex is the area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. The people who look like they would totally get it don't. The people who look like complete prudes do. And so my strategy has to be deliberately, I put what I'm doing out there all the time. Across all my social channels, I have to make synaptic connections happen that will attract those investors to me. Now, theoretically, this is a long, slow, painful, and highly inefficient process. In practice, it does actually work. And I've been frankly gobsmacked at the amount of incoming investor interest I regularly get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my number one investor lead generator. Investors reach out and say, I see you're raising funding. I'd like to talk. I've been forced to adopt this strategy. It's not one I would have chosen, but I can't find the right investors to Make Love Not Porn any other way. However, I recommend this to all female founders, and quite frankly, all founders generally, because when you put what you're doing out there, you will attract your tribe to you. I have friends who are female founders in far more conventional sectors who've been rejected by VCs, I'm not kidding, 350 times. I don't know how they do it. None of us needs any more thorough depressing meetings than we absolutely have to have. And, I actually like the fact that my investors are self-selecting because it means that I don't have to get rejected. I don't have to have horrible meetings all the bloody time. When I do engage in investor dialogue, it's because I know they are interested. And that makes for much more productive conversations, even if they don't end up investing.
Some people in Australia will be aware that my company, Maslow, recently completed a successful crowdfund. And we got a lot of praise for the way we ran that campaign, especially the way we shared statements of support from incoming investors. And whilst I've told quite a few people privately, I haven't shared this publicly, I got that idea from you. Why did you feel that sharing what investors said was important?
So for a couple of reasons, Kane. First of all of the amazing investor messages we've gotten through our WeFunder, many of them have made me choke up and literally brought tears to my eyes. I am so moved by people's different motivations. And those messages tell the rest of the world why Make Love Not Porn is important and why it's a unicorn in waiting. So I felt it was important that way. And it was also important to inspire other people to invest as well, to get them to see why people were investing and to go, wow, I agree with that. I want to see the end of rape culture. I want to be able to educate my kids about sex quickly and easily, and be able to, respond to those and also invest in our campaign.
So obviously you navigated your way around funding challenges. You've found your tribe and you've used social media to do that. I want to talk about something that you shared recently, which Mike Maples said. Mike is a prominent VC, and he said not long ago that the best startups that he's been involved with are radically different from anything that's ever happened. The great startups are sort of an affront to the present. They're a disagreement with the present. And as a result, most people don't like them. And if too many people do, it's not enough of a breakthrough. It's the ideas that polarize that win. It's the ones that most people dislike. But a small number of people say, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? I'm desperate for this. You said that was a breath of fresh air for female founders like yourself, with startups that are affronts to the present. And you've spoken about how you've navigated around those issues, but I'd like it if you could tell me about the impacts on you personally of running a company every day that you know is desperately needed and which so many people tell you is desperately needed, but which mainstream backers won't invest in. Does that sometimes make it hard to get up and keep going?
Well, the two things that most motivate me through all the challenges we face, Kane, are, first of all, our community writes to us every day telling us how we've changed their lives. As a unique business, Make Love Not Porn has a unique superpower. We have the ability to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else can. And so in the 11 years we've operated as a business, we've taught countless young people that porn is not sex in the real world. We've saved numerous marriages and relationships. That is literally what people write to us. You saved our marriage. We've inspired communications breakthroughs amongst couples. Parents are buying their teenage 20-something children's subscriptions to Make Love Not Porn. They tell us, I want my kids to see what happy, healthy, loving sex relationships look like. As with any disruptive technology, use cases emerge the founder never dreamt of. So I was blown away when we began hearing, as we do regularly, from survivors of rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse. We hear from female survivors, male survivors, trans non-binary survivors. They tell us that Make Love Not Porn helped them reclaim their bodies. We help them feel able to be sexual again post-trauma in a situation where porn is way too triggering. And it's not just people who watch our videos. We have several Make Love Not Porn stars, contributors, who tell us that being able to share themselves sexually in a completely safe and trustworthy space has helped them process and heal from sexual trauma. That's not a use case I ever envisaged, and I'm so happy that it is. I know that I'm building something with extraordinary product market fit. If I thought that wasn't the case, I'd have given up years ago. But secondly, the thing that most motivates me is a dynamic that I characterize as, I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put an obstacle in my path, I'm going to fucking well show you. I take all of that daily demoralization, discouragement, and depression, and I turn to motivation and inspiration. Not least, Kane, because I can see the enormous financial opportunity in what I'm doing. My pitch deck for Make Love Not Porn, the title page features a quote from my original pitch deck of 13 years ago, where I said, I want to change the world through sex and make a huge amount of money doing it. And the reason I said that, Kim, was because I was very familiar with exactly the issue you brought up earlier, which is VCs, investors, thinking this is all about social impact, not making money. And I don't want anyone to be in any doubt that I am out to make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money with everything I'm doing. And what is interesting about where I am now in 2024 is all of my challenges have been infrastructure ones. I mean, the world loves Make Love Not Porn. We've had nothing but a positive response globally ever since we launched 15 years ago. My challenge fundamentally is the fact that every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup takes for granted, the small print always says no adult content. And it's all pervasive. Not just can't get funded, couldn't get banked, can't put payments in place, can't advertise, etc. So I'm a big believer in building solutions to my own problems. Because when you have a truly world-changing startup, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And so now I'm focused on raising funding not only to grow and scale Make Love Not Porn, but to build the edtech expansion I've been asked for by parents and teachers since day one, makeloveporn.academy, what I call the Khan Academy of Sex Education. I'm working on building the Stripe of sex tech. This is a huge pain point for every legal, ethical adult sex tech business and a ton of other restricted businesses, cannabis, etc. PayPal will work with us. Stripe will work with us. Mainstream payment processors will work with us. Oh my bloody God, the money to be made out of the Stripe of sex tech. And so I'm raising funding for a fintech, product, which is block-free. You can find it at blockfree.us. On-chain payments payouts to everyone blocked by fintech injustice. Obviously, I want to bring my advertising background to play to tackle the issue that we're banned from advertising, not just us, every female-led sexual health and wellness venture. And so I'm raising funding to build an ad tech product, herefortheads.com, to enable brands to advertise who can't. And I have an AI product in the pipeline. We had it in the pipeline 5 years, the algorithm for consent. So I have an entire ecosystem roadmap because I'm building these solutions for us, but I want everyone else to use them. And every single one of those products is a unicorn in waiting.
Earlier, you referenced something you think is the business model of the future. And if we go back to 2010, you founded ifwerantheworld.com, which you called coaction software. And you've summarized the business model as shared values plus shared action equals shared profit, both financial and social. Can you tell us a little bit more about your views on this business model of the future?
So If We Ran the World came out of my background in advertising, which led me to believe, as I said earlier, that the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. And, I observed that the single biggest pool of untapped natural resource in this world is human good intentions that never translate into action. But there's another equally large pool, which is corporate good intentions that never translate into action either. Because just like people, companies absolutely have good intentions, but again, just like people, they find it really hard to find quick, easy, simple ways to act on it. And so If We Ran the World was built around the concept of microactions, making it really easy to act on intention, and around this model where basically when brands come together with their audiences, by the way, audiences can be, employees, consumers, stakeholders, but when you come together on the basis of values that you all share, which, by the way, is the most important requirement for a good relationship in life as much as business. You'll never truly bond if you don't share the same values. When you come together around shared values, and you're then enabled collectively and collaboratively to co-act on those values, to walk the talk together, you can make things happen in the real world that will benefit consumers, benefit society, and benefit the brand and its business. And so If We Ran the World was co-action software to enable brands to integrate this business model. And what was really amazing was that we launched in 2010, and literally like a year later, Harvard Business School reached out and said, we think this model is so innovative, we want to write it up as a case study and teach it. But basically, when Make Love Not Porn blew up, I had to back burner If We Ran the World, because even I, superhuman as I am, cannot run 2 startups simultaneously. But I designed Make Love Not Porn around precisely that business model. Shared values plus shared action equals shared profit, financial and social. So I foresaw the creator economy 15 years ago when I concepted Make Love Not Porn's revenue share model to democratize access to income.
I exist in a space where I'm often talking about things that feel like the zeitgeist hasn't caught up to yet. And I think that's a space you're very familiar with. Perhaps I might be 5 or 10 years ahead of where the zeitgeist is, but you might be 15 or 20. In researching for today, I found something really interesting about ifwerantheworld.com. And I think you were speaking about this collective action at a time before, certainly in an economic sense or in a commercial sense, it was becoming relevant. But just this week, Australia's Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, gave a speech about how we need collective action to protect our democracy and our way of life now. She spoke about how businesses, charities, governments, universities, and think tanks need to come together to tackle problems that none of them can tackle alone. Why do you think collective action is finally catching up? Is it important to us now as a society more than it's been before?
It's so interesting, Kane, because I am dying to be able to reactivate If We Ran the World. Business school students write to me regularly from around the world going, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Where are you at now?" And I have to explain, sadly, it's backburnered, but it's more relevant. Every single one of us taking micro actions to change what we want to see change cumulatively add up at scale to enormous impact. And the world now understands that. And honestly, there is such an opportunity for If We Ran the World today. If I can get Make Love Not Porn stabilized financially, and if I can raise funding for If We Ran the World, I think it'd be a lot easier today. It makes it incredibly easy to take collective action, and especially for brands and businesses and corporations to be able to share their values with individuals and be able to bring corporate power and good intentions to the power of human good intentions to turn all of that into real tangible action that drives real tangible change.
There's a lot of crossover between your advertising experience. You know, you said before that one of the slogans of the companies you worked for was that we don't sell, we make people want to buy. Do you think your experience in advertising has influenced your support for collective action?
I think my experience in advertising has enabled me to identify the emotional levers that drive collective action. My background is very useful for what I do now because I have spent 39 years working in the business of getting people to do things that they originally had no intention of doing. That is a very useful skill in any capacity, but it's an especially useful skill for getting people to be the change that we all want to see in the world.
Cindy, I want to thank you for your time today. It was an incredible chat. If people want to find out more about you, what is the best platform to get you on?
So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Cindy Gallop and it's at Make Love Not Porn. You can obviously follow me on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook as well. I encourage everyone who's listened to this to please go to makelovenotporn.com, sign up and subscribe. Our subscriptions start at $10 a month, so it's very go to wefunded.com/makelovenotporn and invest. Investments start at only $100, but by investing in us, you'll make everything you've heard me talk about within this podcast actually happen, and you will change the world through sex.
Cindy, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Kate. Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode. As always, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoy the show, please remember that sharing it on social media with your thoughts is a really valuable way to support us. If you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your chosen podcast platform. These are the things that help us bring you the world's most impressive thinkers, and it helps us on our journey toward erasing financial inequality, one of humanity's greatest threats today.